Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. So firstly, thank you so much for having me speak today. I'm really honored to be able to be part of Brain Week again. So for my talk, I wanted to share with you my story, or what I call my brain voyage, and how it influenced my desire to pursue a career in neuro-rehabilitation with the hope of playing a role in improving the lives of individuals with neural damage or disease. Before grad school, I worked as a research assistant in the neurology department at Mass General Hospital, where I had the opportunity to conduct MRIs for multiple different research studies. I saw how, while the overall neuroanatomy between the brains appeared consistent, each brain was also incredibly unique. And I became fascinated by these differences, the similarities, and what that means for each unique individual. In my third year of grad school, I decided to sign up as a healthy control in an MRI research study, not only because after conducting many MRIs, I wanted to know what it felt like, but also the advertisement indicated that I could get a picture of my own brain after the scan. Within an hour after my scan, I got an email from the principal investigator of the study saying, "I would like to touch base with you briefly about your scan." I knew that you don't get called back to touch base about a scan unless there was something wrong. Sure enough, there was. I had a tumor in the middle of my brain. The diagnosis was a left intraventricular meningioma, which is a tumor that stems from the membranes that surround the brain and spinal cord. Intraventricular means inside of a brain ventricle, which are basically holes on either side of the brain that are filled with cerebrospinal fluid, and which cushions and supports the brain. I met with multiple neurosurgeons, radiologists, and neurologists, and we sat down and talked about my options, all of which ended with the same conclusion. Because of the location and the size of the tumor, I'd need to eventually have it out. So the surgery was scheduled May 8th, 2014. My incredible neurosurgeon managed to get 100% of the tumor out, an amazing feat and relief, as total resection decreases my chances of the tumor coming back. However, my journey had only just begun. When I woke up from the surgery, I immediately was aware of new deficits, including a tremendous difficulty with speech, often getting entirely stuck, and this deficit is known as aphasia. I had also developed a rare syndrome called Gerstmann syndrome, which is a cognitive impairment that can result from brain damage or brain surgery similar to mine. It consists of difficulty with writing, with math, not being able to differentiate between your fingers or your right and your left, and in my case, aphasia. So when asked to write my name, I took the pencil and just weakly scribbled nonsense. I had forgotten what and how to write. When asked what is 1 plus 2, I couldn't extract any numerical meanings or relationships. Numbers were just familiar sounds. Immediately post-op, there were other simple things that I couldn't figure out how to do. When my neurosurgeon told me to touch my nose, I thought, finally, something I can do. I heard touch, I heard nose, and his face was right there in front of me. So I smiled at him and proudly bopped him on the nose. And while this made everyone else laugh, I did not understand what was so funny. One day, one of the occupational therapists walked me over to a room in neuro recovery ward at MGH, and the room was called the gym. She took out a pot, some water, and a box of oatmeal and set it next to a stove and said, "Okay, Amanda, I would like you to show me how you would make oatmeal." I remember just staring blankly at her for a minute before taking the box of oatmeal, setting it directly on the stovetop, and then looking at her for approval. When we walked back to my room, the therapist kindly said to my family, "Amanda did a great job, but you should probably watch her if she does any stovetop cooking." Cooking was one of my favorite hobbies, and I never anticipated that I would need temporary supervision. In addition to speech and cognitive therapy, I pushed myself to resume my work in my grad program just 3 months later. It was extremely challenging. My speech was still not great, and my brain was pushing back. I would read something, forget it, relearn it, and then forget it again. I developed ways to improve my memory and better understand math and logic concepts, which started with nailing my multiplication tables, basic addition and subtraction, and telling time, to eventually being able to explain certain machine learning principles for my thesis, which I defended in May 2018. When I first started my postdoc at MGH, we spent a lot of time working with people who had strokes or other forms of neurological damage in the neuro ICU and neuro recovery wards, my two post-operative homes. The first time I stepped through the doors of those wards, I was hit by an unexpected flood of emotions. I saw my room and my bed occupied by someone else, coping with the inexplicable, bizarre feeling of sudden aphasia. I recognized the look in these people's faces of utter frustration, exhaustion, confusion, and even terror and anger. I saw their exhausted family members trying to cope and unsure of the variable trajectories that lay ahead. I could relate through my memories. During one of these visits, we went to the neuro recovery gym. And when I walked in the door, I saw my stove and my box of oatmeal. And right away, I felt my eyes fill up with tears. To say that I couldn't believe how far I've come would be an understatement, because there's still so much of me that is still in that moment. In 2014, it was about managing that oatmeal box. And now it's my unique process in developing highly quantitative tools and techniques in my research, while no longer having a natural quantitative ability. To elaborate on my quantitative experience, when I hear a number, I recognize the sound, but I don't know what it means right away unless I focus my attention on visualizing it, or better yet, using my finger to quickly draw it in the air. That visual and motor imagery sends a message to my brain that bypasses my lesion and allows me to understand the meaning of the number. The best way that I can think of how to describe this feeling to others is through music. Hearing a sequence of numbers is like hearing a familiar musical tune and rhythm, not focusing on the individual notes, but instead holistically listening to the melody. That is an entirely different feeling than if you were to stop playing the melody and think about each note, how each note relates to the other note, black key versus white key, half step versus whole step, lingering chord versus a quick staccato strike. Those two separate ways of interpreting music is what numbers are to me, either going with the rhythm and the familiar sounds of the numbers, or forcing myself to explicitly state their meanings and their relationships to each other, but rarely both at the same time. Yet I do not view myself as a damaged mathematician. Both my grad school thesis and my current postdoc work is highly quantitative. The techniques I've developed and my meticulous strategies to understand and break down complicated equations into their fundamental parts has enabled me to see math from a different perspective and actually enhances my work. My experience has given me a remarkable opportunity to relate to other people who have experienced a form of neurological challenge, to be able to feel what aphasia feels like, or feel what long-lasting neural exhaustion feels like, enables me to develop ideas and share aspects of my reality to my team in a way to inspire new ways of thinking about a problem and ask questions that are driven by the patient experience. While my brain voyage does not define me, to ignore it and say it's not a challenge would be misleading, and it would be saying it's not real. The realities of my experience, the ups and the downs, are what make me and each of us uniquely human, with unique strengths, weaknesses, deficits, abilities, and empathies. I learned firsthand what it is to be a patient with a brain impairment and the incredible process of recovery and compensation techniques, both the frustrations and the rewards that come with it. I have an intense passion for neuro-rehabilitation, and in going from a patient to now a postdoc, I have the amazing opportunity to help in the restoration of function for people with different neurological damage and disease. Thank you.
Wow, fantastic. I am in awe of your experience and your talk. And my question is a simple one. Are you writing a book? I mean, this is something that, no, seriously, you need to share this experience. This is a really important experience for people, especially because they can see in you hope. I mean, somebody that has experienced a stroke, that has experienced a brain damage, can say, you know what, there is hope. You know, look where she's at right now. So is that coming up so I can sign up to buy your first one?
Okay, it's funny you mentioned that because after my surgery, my husband and I were talking about, we should write a book about this experience where one page would be my thought process and then the other page would be his thought process. And we'd kind of go back and forth on what he was seeing in my recovery and what I was feeling and experiencing, differences between days and weeks and years. So we have thought about that. I do want to do that someday. So I will keep you updated.
Yes, don't delay. You need,
Okay.
because the memories go away too. I mean, the feelings go away too, and it's important to just capture. The feeling that you demonstrated today was just absolutely, unbelievable.
Thank you.
And I will say that Amanda was a bit of a legend in her cohort at the time. I mean, all of us, right? You're in graduate school, or I was a postdoc at the time, but she was a graduate student, and your life sucks when you're a graduate student. Sometimes it's so much work and it's so hard. And then all of us are looking at Amanda, who's recovering from brain surgery. And we're like, I think I can do it. What am I complaining about? You know what I mean? So
that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's really inspiring for anyone, just not just people dealing with brain problems, people dealing with everyday problems.
Absolutely. And on that note, I'll read one of the comments. It's more of a comment than a question. Says, Dr. Duffy, this is exactly why I also now study neuroscience. I was an MRI technologist, and I too was fascinated by the similarities and uniqueness of each brain. I also volunteered for imaging, and they found a pineal tumor, which luckily did not have to be removed. I cannot believe you pushed through a PhD program this way. So glad you had an amazing recovery story.
How was the reaction of your teachers, your professors, the people around you? Because obviously, it's not just about you. You have to have also a group of people around you that are understanding and that can be supportive and nurturing.
I was so lucky to be in such a nurturing and supportive environment. So before my surgery, I kind of gave a heads up to everybody that I was going to go have surgery. I was not quite aware of how extent the experiences would be after my surgery, what my thinking would be like, all of that. But my lab was so incredibly supportive. The whole neuroscience department was incredibly supportive. And I just feel so fortunate for that. My family was so supportive. My husband was always there. So I feel lucky because I can't imagine going through this without that kind of support. And I mean, if we think about the probabilities of it, that's so many people who are going through this without a neuroscience background, with knowing, with not having the being in a neuro program, hearing things from other people, knowing what an MRI is, knowing what that's gonna be like, having all the family support. Part of the reason I like to share my story is because I'm an anomaly. So many people have similar experiences and have no clue what's going on. So I feel very fortunate to be able to share this story to help other people with their experiences.
I read a book. I read a book that completely and absolutely turned me into reading more about the brain. It's called My Stroke of Insight by Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, and I couldn't put it down. I mean, it was just this is a neuroanatomist that had a stroke and actually was recognizing the stroke as it was happening, and then describing her whole journey into recovery in the context of her knowledge of neuroanatomy. So when I hear your story, I mean, it's like I'm seeing Dr. Taylor, and her experience.
Mm-hmm. So so funny you say that, because she became such an inspiration to me. I read her book too about probably less than a year. It was less than a year after my surgery. And there were so many relatable things that she talked about. And hearing stories like hers, those are the kind of stories that helped me push through. So you say her name and it just makes me light up, because yeah, her experience was quite similar to mine, even though she had a stroke. But her experience was different, but there were a lot of similarities as well. Yeah, and she has a great TED Talk too. So I encourage everybody to go watch the TED Talk.
Yes,
absolutely. Maybe we can put it in the chat. We have a question from the audience. What you described about hearing the numbers, would you say this is like an acquired synesthesia?
No, what it more is like is that I can hear, it's kind of like the music experience, where I will hear something that sounds familiar to me. And if someone were to quickly tell me, do a calculation right now, or actually even as simple as meet me at 2:30 at blah, 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 I need to think about that for a second. And so I will hear it. I'll recognize that's a number. But then in order to really understand what that is, I need to kind of switch to the other type of musical listening, which is more what relates to what. Okay, 2:30, what's that near? Okay, draw it with your finger, got it. Okay. So it doesn't take me too much time to get that all sorted out, which is why I can do a lot of quantitative work in my research. But it's something that I have to do. And I've come to terms with that. So there was a quote that Dr. Brewer said earlier, the only way out is through. And that really struck me, because that is absolutely true. I was, tried to deny a lot at the beginning of all of this, and push. And the pushing was good. It got me going. But I realized the best way to kind of heal and move past this, or embrace part of it, is through it, not through it. And so that's exactly how I feel.
the only way out is through it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
From
Well,
a neuroscience perspective,
what's that?
From a neuroscience perspective, it's almost like, the parts of the brain that have to do more with language, right? That aphasia, are probably still recovering. And so it's almost like you're relying more on your visual system. It's like you're converting from the auditory to the visual in order to sort of bypass, like you said at the beginning, the areas of your brain that might still be recovering. Yeah,
I actually always wonder, wouldn't it be cool to do a functional MRI where someone said, here, do this math quickly, or like on the screen where you're lying under for the MRI, and 1 + 2 pops up. Will my finger areas light up in my motor cortex? But yeah, I wonder that too. Plasticity in the brain is amazing.
Well, let me tell you, not only you have healed yourself, you are healing a lot of people listening to you today. And I truly encourage you to share widely your story, because it would be very, very helpful to millions of people.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.